I'm LaDon Matthys. I'm the owner of Surmount Services. We're based in Georgetown and we work in the North Austin, Round Rock, Leander, Cedar Park area. We have a contract with Texas Workforce Commission to provide employment services. We do job skills training, supported employment. We do some work skills classes. We also do educational consulting and private practice counseling. We have a small team. I work with two part time employees, and they do job skills training and supported employment also. Supported employment is the service that we do the most for Texas Workforce. It is uh, provides the most support for employment. So we typically do an assessment in the beginning that lasts we spend about 10 hours, 9 to 10 hours, doing that with the client to see kind of where the strengths are, what the needs are, things like that. And from there, we go into supported employment where we assist with resumes, we prepare for interviews, we will go out often and talk to managers of a business to see kind of what the needs are and how our clients would fit there. I would say that that is the service that we do the most. There is a training part that we do. It's called vocational adjustment training. I feel like that's really needed. There are some soft skills things. There's separate classes. So soft skills. There's one about disability disclosure. There's a transportation, um, and those are not referred. We don't get referrals for those much. I think the issue is by the time somebody gets services at Texas Workforce, it's um, it's only one service at a time. So by the time someone gets services, they're ready to be employed, even though those classes might be helpful for them before they're looking for employment. Yeah, I feel like those soft skills are huge, and I don't feel like that matters, disability or not. Managers are a lot more willing to train if someone has the soft skills and can get along with their coworkers, right? They're there on time. Um, and it's a lot easier to keep a job, right? If you're there and you're there on time, you're there every day, right? And so again, right, managers are a lot more willing to let somebody stick around if they had those things going on, even if they don't necessarily know the hard skills and are having a bit harder of a time learning those. I got my bachelor's degree in education, and I was going to be a teacher and a coach, and I was going to teach PE and coach, and I had to have a second teaching field. And um, the advisor said special education education was easy. Uh-huh. Um, and so that's what I did, and I went to do my student teaching, and I was with students with intellectual disabilities, and I thought, I thought if I could do this all day, right? That, um, okay, I gotta stop for a minute. It's silly. Um, I just thought, I could hang out with these people all day. That's amazing, and so I just kind of fell in love with it, and so I taught from a long time ago until about 2010. I was in the classroom. And then I went to Leander ISD and I was a campus leader, a special education um, team lead there for several years. And then I went back to school to get my counseling master's. I think a huge challenge, with starting the business was having the courage to not have a regular paycheck, right? And then it was definitely a lesson in patience to get the contract with Texas Workforce that took about a year from start to finish to get on board with that. Fortunately, I had been working with someone else who had a contract, and so that made it a little easier. I kind of knew what I was doing by the time I got the contract. I had been doing the work for quite a while, and I taught vocational classes in high schools before that, so it had some connection with both rehab and things like that. So, um, and I think challenges since then have been learning how to run a business, right, and kind of dealing with Texas Workforce. That can be a frustration for lots of different reasons. There's a lot of turnover there. And so uh, many times I'm the expert on the services rather than the employees who are there, um, which can be a frustration. But also, being glad that I'm there so that I can help guide clients through that process. There are always different things. I think when I am going into a business to talk to a manager, I can almost immediately tell if it's going to be a friendly place for, our clients to work. I have someone working in a business right now. He's struggling quite a bit. Um, we're trying to do some different evaluations, and his managers are amazing. And they are really encouraging and they want to have him there. And part of that is it's a hard job to fill. And also, he's there every day before it's time to be there. And then having all the assessments that someone needs, right? I can work with someone for um, quite a while when something else comes up and I think, oh, this assessment might be useful, right? Like he hasn't had a physical job before. And so when I'm watching him work, I'm thinking an OT evaluation is going to be helpful for him to be more successful. And so it's nice to have those managers who are dedicated to, you know, they're in it for the long haul and they're willing to let him work to where he can be more successful. Yeah, I had a guy who it was really taking me a long time to figure out what was going to be a good fit for him. And I talked to a manager at a car wash. The client felt like that would be a good fit for him. He was willing to do that. Um, and he was really a happy guy. Right. And so I bugged that manager over and over again, right? Until he finally got tired of me bugging him, and hired the client. And, if someone's not going to tell me no, well, then I'm going to keep asking, right? If you're going to string me along, then I still think there's a chance, right? And so they gave him a job. He sat out front. He just did one, when cars would come through, I think that needed their tires cleaned. He would clean the tires. And I went back, after we'd closed the case for quite some time, and the manager told me, like, hey, I really didn't want to hire him. And he's really changed the culture of the business, right? Everybody's happy. The customers know him. They're happy to see him when they come through. And, they were throwing a birthday parties and all kind of things. And yeah, that's definitely one of the things that I think about when I think about uh, the success stories or when I'm having a really hard time, right? And I need a little boost, right? Those are that's one of the guys that I think about. I had another guy and he had a couple of jobs. One was at Walmart and one was doing office cleaning. And he was really a social guy. And those were kind of solitary jobs. I mean, he was there with people, but he wasn't really interacting. And he lost both of those jobs. And then we got him in as a host in Whataburger. And, before I knew it, he was calling me going, hey, I got employee of the month because he was just so friendly and so happy to greet the people that were there. And, just a lovely young man, but really, hadn't been in the right spot before. Yeah. Well, and I feel like making sure that we're honoring whatever those strengths are, right? I certainly work with people who are like, no, customers, right? I don't want to interact. Yeah. And so, um, just honoring those things that clients want to do and really digging in and figuring out where those strengths are and how we can honor that, what we can find um, that makes them happy. I was talking to someone the other day about a teacher who said we're doing an assessment. They're still in school. And the teacher said, "Oh, they're lazy and manipulative. Like they don't want to go to any job sites." And I was like, "Well, maybe they're taking them to job sites they hate, right? Like." I would probably seem lazy and manipulative too if you put me out building a house, right? So it can be hard to find a spot for someone and it can be tempting to take the first thing, right? And so it's dedicating that time, right, to finding that and convincing TWC, right, that it's okay to take that time to do that. Yeah, a pretty big question because I think, you know, I mean, one of the first things that pops to mind even is transportation, right? If you don't drive and you don't live within the Austin city limits, transportation is limited. Um, so I think that's a big part of it. Um, Also, you know, I think of people who have a disability, and according to the state, it doesn't rise to the level of needing support for independent living. So at that point, there aren't services except for private services, right? You can put in an application for low income housing, for example, but and that comes with some support, but it's not disability specific support. Um, I think that's definitely a huge gap, right? And I think about you know, programs like college living experience and independent living experience. Um, and recently, TWC has stopped funding those programs. But those have been big programs, right? To that help people learn to live on their own while they're going, you know, to college. Also, the post secondary programs like Aggie Achieve, those have recently stopped being supported by Texas Workforce, from my understanding. I think there is a big space for people to move in there and figure out how to provide that. I know, right, that AIM, the Adults Independent and Motivated, right? Those were a parent group who kind of banded together and made those services available for some people. Um, but yeah, it's a big gap. I'm saying that over and over again, right? But it's hard, you know, when I think about it. If you know, if you qualify for a group home, um, sometimes that's okay, but also not necessarily greatest places to live all the time. There are good ones, right? But for the most part, people don't want to live in those places. There are day habs um, that ideally could provide some of those skills and do provide some of those skills, but much like the group homes, leave a little bit to be desired for the most part. Well, I feel like because things are in such flux, that's changed a little bit right now. I I need to hire someone, but I'm not going to hire someone because I don't know what's. I feel like everything is so unsure, and it's expensive to hire someone and train them. There's a certification for every single service, right, at Texas Workforce. So you know, I'm kind of put that off to see kind of what's going to happen. Um, you know, I have before sort of and still right, hopefully things will smooth out, but kind of a dream of starting a sub business that is somewhere that people could come in and work on work skills in an actual business, right? So I, you know, have tossed around a lot of kind of things about what a business would be that would work that way, that people could sort of work in different areas. um, but I think that that's probably one of my biggest dreams. When I taught in Oregon, we had as part of the 18 plus program, we had a house right beside the train line, and like 2 blocks away, we had a storefront where they made gift baskets, and sort of, you know, people could come in who lived in the area and give them, but they also shipped them out. And so you know, when I think about things like that, there are just so many things that you can do, right? And so many experiences that we could provide in a way that, you know, is not like the sheltered workshops of old, right? But in an actual business that is productive and sort of being able to learn different aspects of the business. I would love to be able to do something like that. Well, actually, that's a little known service that TWC provides, is a self employment service. And there are few providers, is one of the issues. And the counselors are unfamiliar with it. And so they don't make referrals for it. Um, So I think part of the advice would be if that's something that someone wants to do and wants TWC to help with that, because they can help with some different sorts of funding with that also, is to really push for that and not allow themselves to be convinced like, oh, you shouldn't do that, right? You should do this. And so because it is a lot of work, obviously, to start a business. And I think, I think on your own to do that, right? Also, there are lots of contracting things, right? There are lots of places, websites, right, to go and get sort of contract work. I think that's a good way to start, depending upon what you're doing. Um, I've certainly seen lots of examples, right? Lots, a few examples of people starting a business like um, a coffee shop, right? That takes a lot of support. And so knowing that if something like that is going to happen, um, there's going to need to be a network of people, right? That's outside of necessarily professionals, right? And friends and family being able to come in and help support that. I think it's sort of being creative about what you're doing and being able to it can be hard to find someone to help guide you and be creative in those ways. I think about people who are home a lot and they know that they want to work, but really have an idea about what they want to do. And so I think it's important to have a provider or someone in your life, if you're not able to do that on your own, right, to help you get out and see different things. I'm working with a couple of people right now and they don't really have a work history and they have some amazing skills in different places. And so, typically if I'm helping someone look for a job, we're doing applications, we're doing job searches together. Maybe we're going out to talk to managers. And with, this one person, we'll also go to job fairs. We're starting to go out to places and interview people and watch people work, right? Like here's the job we're talking about, right? Because in someone's head, maybe it looks a lot different if they're not in that space. And it can be hard for certain jobs to go out and watch people do them, right? Um, but this particular lady I'm thinking about, she wants to clean offices, and she's a little bit hesitant to think about cleaning anywhere where people might be having service, right? And so, we can go to a restaurant and go, oh, look, their cleaner comes in at 9 o'clock in the morning, right? And they're gone by the time the customers get here, right? Or we're going to an assisted living facility and kind of watching, okay, these are the people who clean the rooms, right? Here's how this looks when this is happening. Um, I mean, we're always, kind of watching videos and doing research and all those things like that. Um, but again, I think we can get in a rut and go, okay, here's what you want to do. Let's go, right, do this, fill out applications and see what happens. And so trying to think outside the box and talk to people that, you know, networking, right? People that who are doing different things because you never know who's gonna have an idea about something that may be good. And then obviously like just different kinds of assessments too. I think like some weird things come up and people can really grab onto that. Probably a little bit more from TWC, maybe 60/40. I do have people. I often have people call me and tell me that somebody referred them to me, and I don't have any idea who that person was. And so I always wonder, like, oh, hey, how do you know me? Where did you hear about me? Um, so that's nice. And then, right, people that I've worked with in the past, like I often have people who maybe I placed in a job several years ago, and now they're looking for work again. And so when they come back, they'll either just call me directly or they'll call their counselor and let them know. So, and that's always nice. It sort of reinforces, right? Okay, right, we're doing what we need to be doing because I can sit here and think like, ooh, I'm doing it. I'm doing great, right? But when I get people coming back over and over again, um, it tells me that being effective for someone. People don't know about resources, right? And they don't necessarily hear other people's stories. And so um, uh, when I think about, services that I'm looking for, right? And I feel like I'm pretty plugged in to what's going on. And it happens probably at least once a month. I hear about a service that I had no idea about it. And I'm always surprised. I'm like, oh, I thought I knew all the things that were going on. Right. And obviously I don't. And so having that central place for resources, and then especially with clients, right? That's motivating for people who, when there are success stories like, like we've talked about, and, some other people that we know in common, um, it's a lot more likely that someone will take the steps that they need to take, because they can see that these other people have been successful and that it's not impossible sometimes when it seems like it is. Well, I think, one of the things is that the hesitance, I think, too, to reach out to people that you have heard about, right? Speaking from a client's perspective, like, I don't really want to, I don't really want to make those calls, and being able to reach out to people to find out what resources they have or how they can help, right? Maybe you look at a website and you go, oh, that doesn't really sound like, you know, the thing that I'm looking for, or this doesn't sound perfect sometimes, right? And just, sort of reaching out to those people and asking the questions, because I often get calls and it's not necessarily my services that they're after, but I usually can give them some resources so that they can go off in a different direction and find what they need. Yeah, I feel like I have 3 new ideas every week about things that I could do, right? Like, "Oh, this is really needed. We could do this." Like when somebody goes through, they go through all the benchmarks of supported employment. Um, Sometimes a they don't if they don't have a Medicaid waiver, for example, right? They don't necessarily have another agency that's coming in to help them problem solve if something comes in at work. Maybe they have a counselor, or they're, other kinds of therapy, but not somebody specifically, to help problem solve when something comes up. And so, often people will call me back and I'm like, okay, well, if it's gonna take 30 minutes, I'm just gonna go do it. Right. Because you could have already lost your job if you're gonna wait for TWC to get those services in place. Not always, but many times, right? And so even like a, monthly service for people who are kind of, need some support, but they don't need you there all the time, right? Somebody to come in and problem solve. Or, if a new manager comes in, your hours get cut, right? Things like that. And then even just some support, um, sort of group support around the stresses of having a job, and the, unique stresses of having a job when you have a disability. I guess I don't think about that very much. I, look back at sort of the trajectory and sort of how it started, and how, um, I'm drawn to this community, right? And so, and I think that's what I think most about just the how interesting it has been, all the sort of different roles that have been in, how I've sort of moved away from the community, and then every time, like, oh, but right, oh, but this, right? Like now I'm a counselor, right? I'm going to work with people who have trauma, and I'm drawn back, right, to people with disabilities um, that have trauma, eh, and eh, trauma as a result of disabilities. And so, yeah, I'm not quite sure how it happened. It wasn't my plan, but uh, it was my mission at some point. I'm really glad that you're doing this, right? I think that it's needed, um, and helpful, right? Like I think about people accessing resources in this way, right? When I think about, because that's another thing I often think about, right? I need to figure out, right, how to make a resource guide for people. And I don't, it's not my first thought to go, oh, like, let's make videos, right? And I think it's a lot more accessible to people in general. People want to be able to see it in this way, right? And access it in this way. So I think, yeah, I think what you're doing is is going to really make a difference, or is probably already making a difference. And I think encouragement, right, that it gives to people who are out there and they're doing the work and maybe don't, they're proud of themselves, but don't maybe recognize like what a difference they're making. Yeah.